Welcome back to Parents Canada Talk Radio on News Talk Saga 960. I'm Jason Thompson, and I am here with the one and only
Katie Dupuy, editor-in-chief of Parents Canada, the one and only.
You are the one. I don't know anybody else like you. I know nobody else like you.
Well, I hope that's true of everybody.
I say that, but you and I kind of share something, which is we both work from home by and large, which means you're going to have to manage the kids at the end of the day, which is an interesting thing. Kids are just coming home after the first month of school. You just wrote something actually about this, about the first month of school, didn't you?
I did. I just wrote the 6 things that I learned from the first month of school, a recap, because I feel like, there's a lot of like lead up in the back to school, and then all of a sudden, back to school's over and all the messaging changes to Halloween. And so I really wanted to write, sort of what I've learned from the first month of grade 3. My older one is Sophie, and she's in grade 3. And the younger one is Juliet, who is in senior kindergarten, but she thinks she's in grade 12. So,
don't they all?
Yeah, this one is like the queen. She gets out of the car and she says to her, like, all of her friends are there, and they run to the fence, and they're all like, Juliet, good morning. And she's like, hi, guys. Like, she is the queen. So
this is a film. This is a short film. I can see it on YouTube in the next 6 months for sure.
She's directing, starring, and producing.
Awesome. All right. So what'd you learn? What were the 6 big things you've learned in this first month?
So I learned that my kids are capable of more than I give them credit for. So like you said, I work from home, and if they had their way, there would be like ponies and fairies there to greet them when they get home, and there would be a constant stream of entertainment. And I've learned that they are actually much more independent than I gave them credit for. But in addition to that, I've also given them tasks this year that they hadn't had before. So they have to make their beds in the morning now.
Right.
And by making their beds, it's hit and miss, and I may or may not remake them later. But they do it, and they have to empty their lunch bags.
Why do you remake them after?
Because they make me insane. I don't know. I just can't. Like, I can't walk past their rooms to see these beds that are not really made.
I just shut the door.
No, there's no shutting the door.
The rule in my house is public areas have to stay clean. I don't want to see what's behind. I say that, but we just repainted the rooms. The things I found under the beds. Oh,
yeah.
No.
See, that's what I'm afraid of. So no,
okay.
I don't want to. I don't want to do that.
You win this round. Number 2.
That according to my children, forgetting to return a form is like torture. So I forgot the farm field trip form, and was reminded tersely this morning in the playground. But I also forgot the recorder form and the money. And by forgot, I may be putting air quotes around it.
Yeah.
Just kidding, not really.
There are schools that are still waiting for forms from my son who's in first year university from grade school. They're still waiting for me to return those forms.
Yeah, you should just find them all, bring them all.
That's a great idea.
That the lunches are hit and miss. I make pretty good lunches, and there'll be one day where the lunch comes back, there's nothing left in it. I'll make the exact same thing the next day, and the whole thing comes back.
I can't figure that out. Like, I'll take the kids shopping with me, and I'll be like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Besides all of the sugar. And they're like, I want this. So you pack it, and then it comes back later. And then, of course, my partner's like, they don't like your lunches whatsoever because it always comes back. It's like, but that's not true. It's just
I took them to the store. Yeah, I get it.
All right.
That my kids can get overtired just like babies do. Especially the little one. The little one just turned 5, and she turns into a total gremlin when there's no sleep. Like when she's past the point of no return.
Don't you find the same thing for you, like as an adult?
No, I can power through.
Really?
Yeah.
I got a nap.
No, I can't nap. If I nap, it's game over, really.
But I learned, because I'm, and we talked about this on the sleep episode, I've really kind of like hacked my body to understand how to get a 15-minute rest, because so you don't interrupt the REM and the deep sleep and all that sort of fun stuff and that sort of thing.
In theory, it's supposed to, I know that I should learn to do that. But
so you're pleasant all day long is what you're saying?
No, I'm pleasant. No, I'm not pleasant most of the time. This probably has to do with the lack of sleep. Let's be real.
Fair enough. Number 4?
I can be quite pleasant, and usually I'm very upbeat in the playground, especially. But yeah. But
this is like the beginning of a Tig Notaro sketch.
Yeah. No, my kids though, like I remember when the kids were babies and they were on the schedule of like, they would be awake for 2 hours, then they would nurse and they would go back. Like there would be playtime, and they would nurse and they would be changing, and then they would go back to sleep again, right? And it was kind of that whole sleep begets sleep thing.
Right.
And I've sort of forgotten that especially with the little one who's 5, like if she doesn't get a decent amount of sleep, she's a disaster.
I get that. Okay, so now I don't want to give away all the spoilers because I want to get to our topic for today. But let's do one more.
That's the last one, though. Oh, no, I guess there's one more. So that going to bed without being organized is like done so at my peril. Like if I don't like wash the lunch boxes ahead of time or, you know, make sure that the next morning is set to go, it's just a disaster.
I'm with you on that. I find, like, I'll tell the kids, you have to make your lunches at night because I want to wake you up at the last possible second so that we don't have to have the conversation about how tired you are, which they will be anyway. But ultimately, it benefits them to be able to say, okay, well, you know what? We'll just flip the switch and we're out the door. My house is quiet and orderly in the morning, and that's very, very helpful.
Mine is not.
Okay.
No, we need to work on that. It is on the mornings that I'm organized, but when I'm not, it's game over. Because mine are little, right? So like, you know, my 5-year-old's not packing her own lunch as much as I would like. I mean, she probably would try, but I imagine it would be an interesting thing.
That's great. And this is going to be published at Parents Canada at some point?
Oh yeah, it's on the website now.
Oh look, it's on the website.
It's
What's
kind
the
of
title
just
of
a
the
funny
article?
6 things I learned in the first month of school.
There you go. Check out the website, by the way. It's new, it's shiny, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and we're doing a ton of updating, and we've got lots of great stuff coming up for Halloween.
If you're an SEO nerd, this is the place you want to be right now.
Yeah.
All right.
We're doing lots of that.
So let's pivot to something that's a lot more pressing, a lot more surprising, and a lot of stuff that I had to learn about, which is vaping.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of August, the FDA labeled vaping an epidemic in light of some of the deaths and injuries and illnesses. More than 1,000 people have fallen illness. 26 people have died at the time of the recording. They can't conclusively say it was vaping, but they definitely feel that vaping has a role to play. By and large, the theory is it's cannabis vaping, but we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about vaping and tobacco and the kind of impact that can have that. So why don't we start there? Why don't you kind of unpack for us, you know, when we talk about vaping, what do parents kind of need to know?
When parents, I mean, from my understanding, when parents are talking about vaping and the vaping that kids are doing, you know, in the schoolyard and, you know, at parties and stuff, it's nicotine vaping because they can get their hands on it pretty easily.
And they can hide it. I talked to somebody this morning who said, you know, they can, because the vaping tools, so basically when we say vaping, we're talking about electronic cigarettes. It's mostly nicotine. The way it works is that, you know, you have a pod or a liquid, they call it juice.
And
right?
it's flavored usually, or can be,
Yeah. And the difference is that with cigarettes, you actually burn something. This it vaporizes it so that you don't, you know, the way that the industry has sold it is it's safer than cigarettes. We'll get into that in just a couple minutes. But what she told me was the tools that you use for this, they look like vaping pens and things like that. They look like a pen, or they look like a USB thumb drive and things like that.
They look totally innocuous. They're just,
And you can find that they can hide them really easily. So what she told me was that
there's not usually a smell. Like it's, you know, it's much easier to hide.
Yeah, because they're candy flavored and things like that. Is that they're going to school dances and they're in like a large pack of people and they're vaping in the middle of it. And then if you come by to kind of bust them, they can just slide the pen up their sleeve or something along those lines. If you're at home, you know, you might mistake it for a USB thumb drive or something like that. Like these are real and present things, because with vaping, the theory is it may not be as safe as we're hearing. So these
it's
pods,
not as safe as you're hearing. It really isn't. I mean, like, you know, it's
safe as being marketed, maybe as the words.
Yeah, because you, like you said, you're not burning something and inhaling it, but you're still inhaling something. And yes, it's different, but it's not. You know, the way that the one of the big problems is the way that the vape is actually constructed. So, you know, like the cartridge and the heat source are, from what I understand, not always separate.
Right.
And so you run the risk of inhaling stuff that's not just the nicotine, right?
I'd seen that. One of the promotional things from a marketing perspective is that there are far fewer chemicals and substances in it than traditional cigarettes. And so sometimes they have position this as a cessation kind of product, a step down product, a safer product. So there's like 4 or 5. But one of the ones they don't mention is if the liquid and the vaporizer or heat source are the same, you could be getting chemicals from the heat source, which is kind of freaky.
Yeah, and considering that they're all made out of plastic, you know, like what are you actually inhaling? So sure, you're inhaling nicotine and you've signed up for that. But like, what is the measure on what else you're inhaling?
Well, and governments are starting to pay attention, right? Yukon just raised their smoking tobacco age to 19. The one that blew me away is the Trump administration is trying to pull flavored vapes to say, you know what, we're going to make those illegal. And part of the reason is that some of the initial advertising has been around the fact that, you know, there are these candy flavored ones and there are these fruit flavored ones and all that sort of, you know, as a person who didn't know much about vaping, the way that I kind of probably processed it in my head was the same as like a hookah, right? Like you see that and you don't think it's dangerous, but again, some of the information that we're learning is that It's that understand that the studies, and I'm trying to kind of couch our bets here, but understand the studies are not fully in, but the stuff that is coming in is not good looking.
Well, it's not as good as some people want to believe it is, right?
Right.
That is, yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
I don't love that they're, when we go into the gas station, like, this summer after camp, there would be like the odd day that we'd go in to get a popsicle from the gas station. And the assortment of vapes that is on the counter right in front of you, the pods and the vapes, is staggering.
Right.
And, my kids don't understand what they are, but they look fun, right? They're different colors and they're whatever.
Fun.
So, there was a day where Sophie, my almost 8-year-old, picks up a vape and is like, Mama, what is this? Like, that's not great. That's like the cigarettes are behind the counter, behind the, like the almost like locker type things.
Right.
So there's no real opportunity for them to handle that. There is no opportunity for them to handle that. But a vape, she literally could just pick it up off the counter and ask me the question about it.
And a couple of things that you should know about those vapes is, like, in one of those pods, that's as much tobacco as in an entire pack of cigarettes, thereabouts. And the thing is that, yes, there's arguments to be made that tobacco is addictive, but it is not. It's the burning of tobacco that's the problem. But again, we're learning that it can cause heart issues and things like that as well. But that idea of, like, there's an entire pack of cigarettes in one of these pods really, really shocked me.
Yeah, for sure.
Another one we found out, a 2015 Waterloo study says that e-cigarette use is up. That's not a surprise. It's just good to see that the data is backing it up. The line is this: is that 20% of high school students have tried vaping in the last month. So 20%. If they're not doing it daily, there definitely is some of the impact. And some of the health risks that come with it is, obviously, we talked about the addiction, harmful to brain development. You hear that a fair bit. You still have to deal with secondhand smoke. As somebody who grew up in a household with smokers, this is something that still terrifies me. I'm almost 50, and I'm thinking, someday lung cancer may actually come for me because I spent the first 22 years of my life with people who smoked 1 to 2 packs a day. You can possibly, you can use vape other products that are not necessarily made for the cartridges.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that, like, there is also this idea that, like a cannabis vape and a nicotine vape are different things for the most part. I mean, I know there are products out there that are both, and but for the most part, the ones that you see in the gas station, those are nicotine. So if a kid is trying to use it for cannabis, you actually can cause serious damage to yourself, and like not long term. I mean, long term, but like not in something that's going to take a while to surface, but immediately.
Right. Well, now that we've scared the heck out of every parent out there, we want to talk about what you can do about this. And we actually have an expert, a board-certified psychologist, Dr. Vinay Saranga, who's going to join us just after the break. If you have some questions, you can hit us on social media at Parents Canada, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're going to be back in just a couple of minutes with Parents Canada Radio on News Talk Saga 960. Welcome back to Parents Canada Talk Radio. I'm Jason Thompson, and I'm here with
Katie Dupuis, Editor-in-Chief of Parents Canada.
I shouldn't have tripped over that one. That was it's such an important thing. You've done some great writing over the last little while. Right now we are talking about vaping, nicotine vaping, and some of the challenges that come with it. We have actually a special guest today who does some work with adolescents around vaping and their families. So I want to welcome to the show Dr. Vinay Saranga. Dr. Saranga, hello.
Saranga. Yeah, Saranga.
I practiced it for a day and a half.
You did practice it, I know.
I'm sorry. Doctor, thank you and welcome to the show. I know you have some really interesting insight into this, and we're going to let Katie kick things off.
Do you want to tell us a little bit first about your background and sort of why this work is important to you?
Sure. Hi, Katie and Jason. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm a board certified child adolescent adult psychiatrist, and I practice in North Carolina. I have a private practice in Apex, which is a suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm also medical director at a community mental health agency called Easter Seals. We have several clinics throughout North Carolina and Virginia as well. This has been kind of a hot topic for me over the past year. Actually, I'm in the North Carolina Medical Society Leadership College, and so as part of that, we had to do a year-long project. And for mine, I chose smoking cessation and how we can intervene and better address smoking cessation within the mental health population, because about half of all cigarettes consumed, at least in the U.S., are by folks who have mental health disorders or substance use disorders, or a combination of both. So it has a high prevalence amongst the mental health population, and we really haven't been doing a great job of addressing it within the population that I work with, mainly because we're oftentimes, well, for lots of reasons, but oftentimes because other issues take priority, whether it's their schizophrenia or their bipolar or their depression or their other substance use disorders, whether it's alcohol or cocaine or heroin or other opiates. So anyway, so this gets put on the back burner, and so that was my project, is how do we intervene? And so we intervened really by doing a day-long training of all the of many of the docs and other nurses and therapists at Easter Seals about smoking cessation treatment and interventions and referrals. So what basically we can do about it here. And it's of particular interest with me now recently with all the concern about vaping-related deaths and lung illness in our population. Of course, it's a hot press issue right now over the last couple of months. I just read on today, I guess there was the first 17-year-old in the U.S. who in Bronx that was reportedly maybe vaping-related deaths. So, so this is a big problem right now.
Mm-hmm.
With your studying and the secession, what did you come away with? What kind of strategies and thoughts did you come away with?
So so basically, there's we have. First, I think an important piece is education. So educating the medical community about, the doctors and nurses do have some, we have some awareness of how big of a problem it is. I don't think we realize that it's as huge of an issue as we had previously learned, and now of course is coming to the limelight now with all the concern about the lung injuries and the potential deaths related to vaping. So first is education about what are the treatment options we have available, which is nicotine replacement therapy for the most part, or varenicline is available as well in the U.S. for treating this. But also the best intervention is for nicotine dependence is that nicotine replacement therapy, which is the patch for long-term use throughout the day, where they keep the patch on all day long, plus the gum, nicotine gum or lozenge for kind of the breakthrough cravings throughout the day. So that, along with behavioral interventions, which can be face one-on-one therapy, group therapy, or even other support, which in North Carolina we have a quit line, which is text, web-based support as well. So it's really the combination of the two that's really shown the most highest effectiveness
in order to avoid vaping, in order to avoid vaping as a cessation option.
Yeah, well, it's treating nicotine dependence in general. I mean, I don't know specifically for vaping. We do have in the U.S. anyway. I don't know if it's available in Canada, but there's a new campaign from thetruth.com called the Ditch Juul campaign. Now, that's really more geared towards teenagers who vape, and that's I want to get the correct phone number for you. So basically, a teenager would, at least in the U.S. side of things, they would text Ditch Juul to 88709. And through that, they get some text, really support, motivational messages, inspirational stories, just to kind of, whenever they're, if they're starting to feel cravings or feeling like they want to slip or go back to vaping. It's a 24/7 kind of service that's more of a support behavioral intervention for teenagers. I even had, I had a patient recently that started using this. That you start using the service, and she was showing me the inspirational messages and that she gets on a regular basis from them. So we're trying to address it within teenagers, because everyone on these days is on a device, and more so probably teenagers than anything. So this is a way to reach them without criticizing or stigmatizing them for it.
You said, with the research that you've done and in your practice, are you seeing kind of a rise in nicotine and specifically vaping happening? Like, is that something that you see as a routine rise?
Yeah, yes, I am. And since the recent studies and articles I read in 2015, at least, we found out since 2015 we basically found almost a 900% increase in use of vaping products amongst teenagers. So and there is, and we have and we do have the numbers showing that the increased use of vaping and e-cigarettes amongst middle schoolers and high schoolers as well. So yeah, and I am seeing it clinically too. The thing is, I think that's a part of the education piece, is that we have to. It's almost so commonplace now that I think we forget to ask about it. And I think that's the biggest takeaway I took from this project and learning more about it, is that first we really gotta ask them about it, and once I started asking them about it, I'm realizing that some of them are even bringing these jewels into my office, or whatever it is, the e-cigarette products. And had I not asked them, they really wouldn't have even thought to mention it. It's becoming such a common thing now in the high school population, and so that's one of the things that I think parents need to learn to just ask their teenager about it in a kind of a non-confrontational, supportive way, because a lot of times these teenagers, they start it as more from the peer pressure. It may be the cool thing to do. They want to, it's a social thing for them, and then after a certain amount of time, it starts to become where it is an addiction, where they're starting to use the e-cigarette or Juul, whatever it is, on a daily basis, and it starts to get out of hand from there. And a lot of times, really, the teenager does want to stop it, but they just don't know how, and they don't know how to talk about it to, a parent or a loved one, because, and they don't know what to do, so they kind of keep doing it. So these Juul pods are very potent. It's one pod is equal to a pack of cigarettes a day. So, and I even have some teenagers that I'm treating that have been doing like maybe a pod a day or a pod every other day. So it's very highly addictive stuff. And so that's what I have to counsel parents is, talk to your teenager about it, but don't be like critical, don't make faces, don't judge them for it, because if you start doing that, they're not going to want to bring it up to you again, and they won't really come to you about it. So, yeah, I think that's important.
Do you think that the rise in usage is related to accessibility? Do you think that teenagers can get their hands on vapes easier than they can get their hands on cigarettes?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And now these cartridges that I don't know if you've seen them before. They look like USB thumb drives now, and it's very easy to hide it. And and the other piece is that they're kind of marketed in such a way that they have flavors, and so. There's all different sorts of flavors. Lemon, I saw candy cane, cotton candy flavors. This is, the feeling in the community is that a lot of this is kind of to attract the teenage population to use it with the flavors. And so they kind of do it initially because it may have a good flavor, but not realizing that it also has a harmful nicotine and some other toxic substances in there. And so that's how kind of they get hooked. And so it is, the pieces, the paraphernalia of it's just it is easy to hide compared to cigarettes and all that. And you may not even smell. Actually, you probably won't smell any smoke on them. You'll probably just smell the flavor.
Yeah.
So you don't. So a lot of parents don't even realize that their teenagers doing it.
Dr. Saranga, we want to kind of pause this for a couple minutes so we can go to a break. But when we come back, I'd love to talk a little bit. You've already kind of given us a little bit of insight into the kind of conversations you can have if your teens may not be vaping. I want to talk about maybe some of the strategies that you would suggest for those who may already be addicted, and then share with you some of the questions that we've gotten from social media. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we are going to go to break. We're going to keep the conversation going. Again, if you have questions around vaping or anything around tobacco use, please hit us up at Parents Canada. We are on Twitter and Instagram and, what am I missing? Facebook. That's right. See, I sounded like a teenager there.
Yeah.
I'm not using Facebook.
Yeah.
You're listening to Parents Canada Radio on News Talk Saga 960. We will be right back with more insight.
Welcome back to Parents Canada Talk Radio on Saga 960. I'm Katie Dupuis, Editor-in-Chief of Parents Canada, and I'm here with Jason Thompson.
Who is not Editor-in-Chief of Parents Canada.
But that's all right.
I don't think I could do your job. You're too good at it.
I don't know about that.
I've seen your stuff. It's great.
Oh, thanks.
Okay.
You're good. You're very good for my self-esteem today.
Well, let's talk about something that's bad for your self-esteem. Let's talk about vaping.
Yeah.
We have Dr. Saranga on the phone. He has been helping us understand, really what's at stake, what's happening, across North America. There are some just staggering statistics. I think, what was it, a 900% increase in vaping since 2015. That's shocking. In Canada, we actually saw the tobacco rates go up for the first time in 30 years, actually usage of smoking and vaping products. I think that was a 2016 or 2017 study. So those numbers are actually on the increase. So we want to talk a little bit more about what can you do? What can parents do? Because again, sometimes it can be absolutely frightening to think you have kind of no control here. So I want to talk maybe about three scenarios with you, Doctor. One is you mentioned about some of the conversations that you can have with kids who don't vape. Let's go all the way to the other side of the spectrum, which is, what do you do if your teen is addicted? Because nicotine being a primary delivery source here, and that is a very addictive substance. What do you do?
Well, it's a great point. So first, as we kind of discussed before, Jason and Katie, is opening the lines of communication with your teen, so that they feel comfortable talking to you about it, and they're willing to kind of work with you on stopping and open to your feedback on it. The one piece that's important is, we're, as parents, we're role models. So if you smoke cigarettes or whatever or vape at home, if you want your teenager to stop, you better stop. You better stop as well. So, and if, as a parent, if you feel like you're addicted to it, then really probably best to have a discussion with your teenager about you both setting a quit date, whatever that quit date is going to be. If it's going to be today, tomorrow, whatever it is, but you both set a quit date and you both do it together, sort of thing. And don't allow smoking in your home, and strictly enforce that rule for friends that come over or whatever. And ask them about their friend circle. If they're maybe they did not previously have friends that smoked, but now they've gotten into this friend circle that do vape or smoke. So they probably need to, if they really are serious about stopping, they probably need to change their friend circle and find a group of friends that doesn't vape or smoke at all, just to be away from it.
I'm trying to figure out how you do that. How you get your kids to say, you can't hang out with these. Well, I guess that's the same thing as you can't hang out with X because of Y. We all experienced as kids.
Yeah. It's hard though, especially if they have a small friend group and that's like a major part of their social circle, right?
True. Yeah, yeah. So it's a tough thing, and teenagers, in AA and NA, they talk about people, places, things, staying away from the people, places, things associated with the alcohol or drug use. So that if they're truly serious about it, this is what they're going to need to do, because if they're in a circle of friends that everybody else is smoking or vaping, it's going to be very hard to not fall into that peer pressure and say, hey, let me take a drag or whatever. So it's going to be, or if they're really a leader of the group, maybe they need to convince all their friend circle to stop smoking too, because of all the recent highlights that we have with potential deaths related to vaping.
Right.
Maybe that's enough to scare them into stopping it.
Well,
one piece.
I was going to ask, I'm curious to know, with your patients that you have, how do they kind of self-recognize that, this is something I need to address?
Well, so many times it's especially for teenagers, I found if they're in sports, They really, because the vaping, smoking can decrease their lung capacity and can decrease their performance in sports because it's harder for them to breathe and all that. So that's been one of the reasons that they've either they stopped it or they're staying away from it, is because they want to continue doing well in their sporting activities. So that's sometimes one motivator. So I mean that's been an important piece for teenagers.
One of the things, let's back up kind of one step, is, if you're a parent who doesn't know that your kids are vaping, but you suspect that might be happening, what are the sorts of signs we should look for to be able to help identify this so that we can help our kids?
Well, look for some paraphernalia. If they have they have some as I mentioned, it looks like cartridges now, like USB drives. If they have a bunch of them in their pack, that should be a sign. Or if they're smelling of, it may not be smoke smell if they're vaping. It could be some of these other smells like cotton candy or peppermint or chocolate smell. So some unusual smells. Looking if they've changed their friend circle. If they've all of a sudden they had these really highly motivated kids that were all into academics and all that, and all of a sudden they've changed their circle into friends that don't seem as motivated in school and maybe more of a kind of acting out kind of kids, maybe getting into trouble a lot. Those kinds of friend circle, that could be a concern. So and sometimes you can notice changes in mood as well and irritability. Especially if they're kind of withdrawing from the
You also mentioned that the high prevalence of smoking with people who are struggling with mental health. So if you find that your kids are suffering from anxiety or depression or things like that, that may also be something correlated that they should look for.
Yeah, true. And some teenagers are maybe doing it to self-medicate some of that anxiety and depression, because nicotine does increase dopamine and norepinephrine, and which are the kind of the feel-good hormones that make you feel good, but also may help improve attention and focus too. So that they may be treating some of their self-medicating their either ADHD, depression, anxiety with the smoking as well, with the nicotine.
I did wonder too. I have friends that have kids that my kids are quite young, but I have friends with kids that are teenagers, and they're sort of having these conversations right now. And one of the big sort of, for lack of a better term, excuses that kids come up with is that vaping is better, quote unquote, better than smoking weed, than drinking. Would you say, what would you advise parents to say when they're sort of confronted with that logic from their kids?
Well, we know that cigarettes and cigar, a lot of these products available have a lot of toxic substances in them, and that can lead to multiple medical issues, right? So obviously cancer, heart disease, lung problems, increasing blood pressure. So there's a lot of medical issues associated with smoking. Now, it is felt overall that up until recently, it was felt that e-cigarettes had less of those toxic substances than the cigarettes and cigars. But now with the recent deaths, we don't really know if there is something else that's mixed in there that could be causing some lung issues. But so the other piece that I think to keep in mind is that nicotine is highly addictive. So and it crosses the blood-brain barrier very fast, and it's within a few minutes of smoking, it's reached the brain. So it's a very highly addictive substance, and it's one of the hardest substances to stop using, because if you have that, its half-life is very short, and it's out of your system very quickly, which leads to quick withdrawal symptoms, and that's why people very quickly can go up to a pack a day or more of cigarettes, is because you have that quick peak of the response of the increase in dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, the neurotransmitters, the hormones that make you feel good, and then there's a quick drop of it. after it's worn off. And so because of that, there's a lot of concerns about nicotine and other smoking products.
It feels like vaping is less bad for you than cigarettes, but it's not good for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting.
Theoretically, yeah.
Theoretically.
That's been the theory. And then originally it was kind of marketed initially it was marketed as maybe a way as a potential treatment or a way to get off of the cigars or cigarettes if someone's addicted to that. But now it doesn't have FDA approval for it. So for nicotine, it's not e-cigarettes are not FDA approved for smoking.
So there's no regulation then too, right?
Yeah. So it's not FDA approved for that, but it was thought that maybe this is a safer option from cigarettes, and so people would kind of switch to that. But it still has nicotine in it, so it's still an addictive substance, and so anyway.
And it is also true that not all vapes are created equal, right? There are some that are created where the technology is better than others.
Correct. Yeah, it seems like there's multiple mechanisms and products out there now. So the Juul is a popular one, I know, but I know that a lot of most of the teenagers are use Juul here in the United States. But I imagine it's the same in Canada too. But there are other products out there as well.
Dr. Saranga, this has been an enlightening journey. I didn't know much about vaping coming into this, other than, I see little vaping stores kind of popping up in my small town and things like that. Now, I think I have a better understanding and a better understanding of how to have these types of conversations with my kids as they get a little bit older. Wanted to thank you very much for spending some time with us and kind of enlightening us today. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you both for having me on.
Wonderful. We've been talking with Dr. Saranga from North Carolina, who's done some interesting study, and his patients as a psychiatrist has been counseling teenagers and families about how to actually get past vaping and cigarettes and things like that. And I learned a whole bunch. We're going to share a bit of that as we come back from break. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you on social media at Parents Canada. That's on Twitter. That's on Facebook. That's on Instagram. In the meantime, you're listening to Parents Canada Radio on News Talk, Saga 960. Welcome back to Parents Canada Talk Radio here on News Talk Saga 960. I am here with Katie Dupuis. We are shaking our heads. Like, I found the further we were having this conversation with the doctor, just like, it felt like we dealt with the smoking thing 40 years ago. In the research for the show, I actually saw at the height of smoking in Canada, 50% of the population was smoking. Half the population was smoking. I mean, and the numbers are rising for the first time.
And the stat that Dr. Saranga gave us, a 900% increase. Like, that's the same kind of, like, that's I don't even know what.
It's, part of it for me is when I look at the vaping thing is there's a whole kind of techno cool feel to it. So like back in the 50s when James Dean was smoking, it was cool. It was becoming socially acceptable and things like that as it rose and then began to drop. It almost feels sometimes like marketers are kind of drawing on today's version of that, right? They're colorful. There's all sorts of flavors. They're accessible, and you're using this cool tech to be able to do it. So it must be safe and it must be good. And we learned today, while the data is still coming in, because really what have these been on the market for 12 years, something like that now? The data is coming in and the data is showing us that maybe not as safe as we're making them out to be. There could be even worse as we see some of these deaths that are rising and that sort of stuff.
But I was saying, earlier in the show on the break that, I do also think that there is a difference between the way that adults typically use vapes and children, right? So, I mean, I don't want to come down on either side of the argument because I don't know enough about it, except that, I do think that an adult who's using a vape for smoking cessation is different than a child who's using it in the way that they're using them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, that's the classic marketing strategy, right? Just get the kids in early so that they'll be, using the product as they get older, right? And you see that across the board. That's kind of scary.
Yeah. I wouldn't really want to be in those marketing sessions at the companies, right? Where they're like,
Yeah.
here's your demographic that it probably should be, and here's the demographic that we're actually hitting.
So I have one who's 18 and I have one who's 13. So they're in the kind of the range where they're aware of this. In fact, as I was talking about the show driving last night, my 8-year-old was like, "What's vaping?" And I went, like, "Oh, great! Now I've opened a genie." But of course, as you describe it to them, and as parents, you don't tend to describe it in the most positive of ways. You get the "ooh, that sounds really, really gross," right, sort of thing. But in that 13-year range, it becomes interesting to have that conversation, because I know none of my kids and again, my 18-year-old, I would have expected would have experimented with something, but he's into gaming computers and fountain pens, so he can't afford to go out and do these things, which is great, fantastic. But even him, to be able to have that conversation with him, to say, where do you feel? And it seems like a broader conversation. You know what I mean? It's like you're not having a conversation about, hey, don't vape. It's why would you vape? And we heard the doctor talking about that sometimes they're using it as self-medication for depression and anxiety on huge rise, because it crosses the blood-brain barrier so quickly, it gives you that temporary high. But other reasons could be, social pressures, the things that we have heard, in time memoriam, right? The sorts of things, is to be able to have those conversations. Coming out of today, what kind of conversations would you think you would be having with your kids? Not now so much as in a few, I would hope not now, but as in a few years.
I don't know, that 5-year-old man.
I don't know.
No, I mean, I think that it's similar to any conversation about substance abuse, right? I mean, I think that, to your point, 50 years ago, the conversations about cigarettes would have been very different than they are now.
Right.
And so I would want to have the conversation with my kids that, as much as, vaping right now seems like, to kids, it seems that they think it's harmless. Right. But that really, historically, all of these things have proven to be not harmless at all.
If you burn it or vaporize it, it shouldn't belong in your lungs, right? Like that's generally, as a parent, the sense that I take and that I bring to the kids.
Well, I do think getting to the very base level of why, right? I mean, I think everything comes down to why, but asking them, why do you do it? And if the answer is, well, because my friends do it, right? That's one thing. If they say, because it helps my brain slow down and I don't worry so much, or whatever, right? However they verbalize their reasons for using anything, that sort of gets to the root of the way forward, and the sort of, for lack of a better term, treatment plan, right? For lack of a better term, of how to get somebody to either not do it in the first place, like my kids, hopefully,
that's the big thing. The proactive side is, I think that's where you win the game, right? Like if your kid is vaping infrequently or addicted, and you say, well, I want you to stop. First of all, addiction, that's, I have two parents that are smokers, and it's like, they wish to God, like, I don't know anybody over the age of 40 who says, I love smoking, right? Like, and so, but before that, before you get into the kind of that addictive range, to be able to say to them, well, you can't hang out with these kids anymore. It feels like you've lost the battle at that point, right? Like, you've got to kind of get to that before, because then it becomes it's much harder thing to deal with.
Well, and like the battle, it's not just losing the battle, it's that it's escalated so much more than that, because vaping becomes a part of a larger subset of issues, right? If vaping, like I said earlier in the segment, like, if vaping is a major part of that kid's social circle, and that kid doesn't have another social circle, right? I mean, I was lucky as a kid. I played sports, and so I had that group of friends, and then I was on arts council, so I had that group of friends, and then I had friends from elementary school, and I had 3 siblings. Like, I never had a dearth of people to hang out with. Right. But if you're a kid who only has 2 or 3 friends, and vaping is a big part of your social life, I don't know how you just tell them to give it up. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you're, kind of that identity issue. We live in, and this is a much broader context, but we live in that quick hit life, whether it's, whether it's gaming, it's phones, it's vaping, and that sort of stuff. This is stuff that can make you feel good, at least over the short term, and in a couple of ways, not just the chemical, but the kind of social interaction that comes with it. That's a really tough.
It's a hard one, right? Yeah, for sure. And I don't want to ever have to, like, I can't imagine facing my kids, especially if my kids are struggling socially, and then say, actually, I'm taking, like, for all intents and purposes, I'm taking away your social circle because of this behavior. Right. Yeah.
The other thing that I found really interesting is the sense of modeling, right? So the doctor talked about the idea of, if you smoke or you vape, don't do it around your kids, because they see that as socially acceptable behavior. And then I thought back to my own experience. So I have 3 siblings, and they all smoke. and they all smoke, because I don't know how I managed. The joke I like to make is I worked in bingo halls in the 1980s,
Yeah.
so they were nothing but smoke-filled parlors.
Yeah.
So I got it all.
I
in
remember
at once,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I used to work fundraisers at bingo halls, and and there would be like the glass barrier of the other side, but it was all the same.
Our answers for this week is we don't have any answers, which is really appropriate for vaping, because there's a lot of confusion out there. But we hope we've given you kind of some thoughts to think about. Why don't you wrap us up for this week, Katie?
Yeah, thank you everybody for listening. We are Katie Dupuis and Jason Thompson, and you've been listening to Parents Canada Talk Radio on News Talk Saga 960. You can always find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Parents Canada, and we look forward to hanging out with you again soon.